Hello, everyone. This is JD Calderon, and this is Indy Comics Explained. And yet again, I have another fantastic guest. But before we get to that, please hit like, hit subscribe, hit that notification button, and let everybody know that we're here. We're bringing more and more guests on. We want to get on more independent voices, and this is all for you. So please let everybody know, share out the video, and if you'd like to support the video, you go check out the Oswald Chronicles currently on Indiegogo. So without further ado, here's our fantastic guest, Mr. John Celestri.
Hi. How do you do?
Hey, how you doing, John?
Hi, JD.
So John, you've been an animator, and you've done that for what, 30 years?
No, I did for you'd call me a 45-year animator.
Oh, okay, wow, okay. So
because I go back to the early 70s.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm pretty sure you answered this question 10,000 times, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What got you into it? Like, what was that? What was the genesis of, like, what got you, what got you to wake up one day and say, you know what, I want to draw cartoons?
Actually, I wanted to be a comic book artist when I was the first image I ever saw drawn for me was Mickey Mouse.
Mm-hmm.
I was about 4 years old.
Right.
At the time. So I was fascinated by the fact that this cousin, who I was, when I say cousin, I mean he was up in his, as Italian families or Sicilian families, a cousin could be almost anything, that's connected by blood. So he was a cousin from Ohio, from Bello, Ohio, where my grandfather immigrated to from Italy back in like 1885, and when there was and wow. So Celestri's. My grandfather was a barber in he wound up as a very young man, maybe about 17 years old, 16 years old, coming all without knowing anybody other than maybe one relative in the mining town of Bel Air, Ohio, right across from Wheeling, West Virginia, and he became a barber there. Right. And so he was a barber to there. Anyway, a cousin visited us when I was in Brooklyn when I was 5 years old, 4 years old, and he drew Mickey Mouse for me. And so that's my initial sort of attraction to drawing comics, cartoons, and that was I learned that I could do that. My dad could also draw, but he didn't draw the same way. He drew a technical thing. He was a draftsman on ship plans during when in the old days before Xerox and before that, all those plans, they were all hand traced. They were all redrawn, and he was one of those guys with an extremely steady. That's where I get my hands, where I can. I'm very specific and minute detail, being able to carve out a drawing with very small lines and such. Right. So that's where I get my bit of there. But the thing about what I found is that because I was a bullied kid, drawing was my escape into a fantasy world that it was my coping mechanism. But also I found that when I was, as kids discovered I could draw, that was my superpower.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I did, drawing and being a comic book artist, that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a comic strip artist. I wanted to be a sports cartoonist. It wasn't until actually I got into, I was maybe about 22, 23 years old that I discovered I could do very quick pencil sketches were capturing motion.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because I worked at the New York Athletic Club. Are you familiar with that? On their magazine staff. And so they the editor sent me down to the fencing gym and say, okay, do some things for the Olympic fencing team. This is like 1972. 72, and I didn't know I could do that. So I said, okay, let's just do some very switch. I'm self-taught. I didn't go to school for any of this.
Okay.
So it was when I learned I could do capture movement that I decided, oh, I can do this. So that's when I started learning about animation. That's how I got into actually earning a living being an animator.
Mm-hmm. Now, was that your first gig working for that newspaper?
Yeah, yeah. The magazine was the Winged Foot, and it was a monthly magazine. I learned, specking type and proof and layouts and that whole ball of wax, and doing that as a part-time job. I was going to Fordham University at the time,
Right.
so and sometimes so I would do part-time and summer and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, what was your first animation gig, though?
My first animation gig was at New York Institute of Technology out in Old Westbury, Long Island. And this was in 1974, 5, somewhere around that. Yeah, I was about 25. I would kicking around. I was trying to break into animation, and it was nobody was having it because they hadn't had any new animators in like 20 years. There had been no new blood. New York was just filled with all of the people who had worked at the Fleischer, Paramount, and Terrytoon studios of the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, and then when everything just kind of blew up, just dissipated. There was only about 300 people in the whole industry in New York. Wow. In animation, but they just had enough to survive on commercials and TV specials, and everybody knew everybody. I mean, literally everybody in one way or another had sat next to each other for about 5 to 10 years in some way, shape, or form. So it was very hard to break in. So New York Tech was starting to develop computer animation, and they were trying to figure out what to do, what were the problems that a computer had to overcome in order to do computer animation. So Photoshop came out of that. But I was working on Tubby the Tuba. They were doing a show, a feature film, with old Popeye and Mighty Mouse animators. And so they needed new young people who would come in and learn. So it was a 4.5-hour round trip every day for 14 months that I did.
Wow.
That was my schooling. So that was my first gig.
That was your first animation gig. Wow. Now, did you find that, was there an animator that, I don't know if someone took interest, did you have a mentor that maybe took you under his wing?
There were in spirit, what I did was, before getting into New York Tech, I studied the films of a lot of the old Disney and Popeye animators. Right. And what you had was, at that time, you had home movie versions, little clips of animated films like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. There was the hand washing sequence, or maybe you could pick up some 10 minutes of this or that, or like the Alice in Wonderland, and we had an editing machine. So it was a sound editing machine. It was an Elmo, and it was a reel-to-reel. I still have it. It's in my closet. I have those films. So there's like 50-year-old films there, and I don't know if they break or not. And I would watch. I look on the viewer, which was maybe about 3 by 5 at the most, and I would go frame by frame. It was 24 frames per second, and I studied that. The one that I studied the most of was the hand-washing sequence of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and that I didn't realize until years later that is the major. That was the first big sequence that Snow White was developed with, and it was Bill Teitler who did that. And Bill Teitler, as I learned later on, and I just studied him over and over. He did Grumpy in Snow White. He did Baby Dumbo. He did Stromboli in Pinocchio, the puppet master, and he did the Devil on Night on Bald Mountain. He had an incredible range. So studying his work is what got me. I always go back to him as the source of what inspires me, because he drew using vectors, and that's I studied. You don't draw images, you draw forces. And if you study forces, you don't think about the shape. You say, what is the essence of it? Just do that, and then you could put any form on top of it.
That's interesting.
Yep. So,
Yeah.
but when I was at Tubby, I learned all the mechanics from them about exposure sheets, about how to, like, Johnny Gentilella was the Popeye master of throwing a punch. He drew the best Popeye that anybody ever did, and so I learned how to throw a punch, which is you bring your arm back, and then you move it, and then you never show contact, and it's about force.
Right.
You never show the contact, because then you're tapping. In some way, shape, or form. It's just a push.
Right.
So I learned a lot from those guys, sitting next to them for 14, every day for 14 days, 14 months, and that is as close as you could get to the old apprentice system.
Right.
So yeah, that's really how I learned.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, no, it's fascinating. I mean, sitting next to a bunch of old masters, you're like, oh, what are these guys doing?
Right. And I would go home after basically for 12 hours. By the time I got home, I left at about 6:45 in the morning. I didn't get back until about 7 o'clock at night, or what have you. And then I'd go on the weekends or whatnot. I'd still do some drawings, and I'd bring them in, and they'd flip it for me. And they said, "Well, this is what you can't do. What'd you do?" So,
right.
So that was the best way.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. I mean, now you moved from that, right? And you moved on, and right. Let's So, what would you consider your next phase of your career after that initial, job?
After that initial job, I left that job because Richard Williams was doing Raggedy Ann and Andy in New York City. Right. So it was first of all, it was he was the next up. He was sort of like the next Disney. He was doing he was Brit. He was Canadian born, but he had a commercial house in London. He was winning all kinds of Academy Awards and things for his work. Wow. And he was collecting all the young talent in New York, and so I got hired on because I had feature experience. It's very rare back then to get any kind of feature experience outside of Disney. And so there was never anything in New York that anybody had ever done feature before. They'd done shorts, done that sort of thing, or some people had done it before. At the Fleischers out when the Fleischer studio moved to down to Florida and did they did 2 features down there. But the thing about it is that young people didn't have working experience, so I had that, and so I got to be a supervising assistant with my own team. So I had learned a lot from the old classic animators, and then I started learning how to develop. I was starting to develop my own style. So 14 months into my career, I was supervising about 8 to 10 people to do the scenes and such, and so that was the next thing, and it was learning and seeing how animation. Working slowly, because the other one you had to work fast. I mean, you were doing about 15-minute drawings, 10-minute, 15-minute drawings at Tubby. Sometimes you're doing a 2-hour drawing on Raggedy Ann. So there's a different level of draftsmanship. So the concentration was on crafting your poses and making sure that, because there were a lot of things there. There was a lot of stripes and polka dots and lines and what have you in that show, and so I learned about helped really develop my draftsmanship to a solid degree. and that led to going to Nelvana,
Right.
where I worked on a whole bunch of shows there and on Rock and Rule. But there was a detour. The first thing I went to Nelvana for A Cosmic Christmas, but then I had already been hired and offered a job in Los Angeles by Fritz Freeling, who is one of the classic old men masters of directors of like Yosemite Sam and Bugs Bunny and stuff like that. He said, okay, if you are ever in California, I got a job for you as an animator. So I had to, there was nothing going up in Toronto after the first little show that I did with Nelvana. Went to California, spent 4 or 5 months there, was brought back by Nelvana to come to Canada to work for their feature film and develop their story. So that's where all of that is that from about 1974, 1975 until by September of 1979, I was directing my first show. So that's how fast it went.
Wow, that must have went by like a blink. Working so much.
Well, now it feels like a blink, but boy, it was slogging because you're teaching yourself. I didn't go to school for this, and most people don't back then.
Right. Yeah. Now, if you're not stepping out of a university, they probably won't even look at you.
Yeah, but I bet you they can't. Most people can't draw today.
Yeah, that's one of the things I hear.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to be able to draw, to be able to visualize on paper what you're going to do. If you can't do that, you're depending upon being given a puppet to move around.
Right. Yeah, that's the one thing I hear is like now everything's just riggings and you're putting a skin on. I guess the only guys who really draw are the guys who are doing all the design work.
They're doing the design work, but they're not animators.
Right.
That's my understanding. I mean, they're thinking in terms of design, but yet, but then when so that works fine, but then how do you move the characters and what's your timing?
Right.
I would say 90% of everything that I've ever done, I've done without a pencil test. It's only been that, I may have to make an adjustment here and there, like a frame or two or whatnot, but it's all with using the exposure sheets and being able to time something out with a stopwatch and my own interior sense of timing to be able to say, okay, I know what this is. It's kind of like a musician knowing what a note on a bar, on a staff, what should sound like. And so you can then, write down, and then, and then maybe you play it, but, they may make a little adjustment here and there, but you don't have to press, your keys every time and say, oh, okay, well, okay. Okay, that sounds good.
No, I got you. I mean, it's like fascinating. The differences, the way it's matured or the way it's advanced, between the way, things were done, the way they are done, and the fact that there isn't more crossover. That's probably the part that I find a little disheartening, that we don't see more of a crossover between, the modern and the old. You know what I mean?
Well, you can't really cross over without having experience to do that. I mean, most of the people who know what I know are basically in their 50s.
Right.
I mean, okay, let's go. There was a resurgence in the 90s of animation. Okay. A lot of the people who were part of that resurgence, I mean, I worked throughout that period of time on for one particular studio. We did, direct to home videos all the time. We were doing layouts and animation and what have you. But everybody else, anybody coming out of school and getting experience enough to say 5 years worth. If you got out of school in 95 or 94, and there weren't that many schools still. I mean, it was just a Sheridan and then and Cal Arts, and then maybe one or two that grew out of that. Well, at that point, 1995, there was so few people to be able to churn out all of this stuff that the studios started to, really instigate. We need more people. We need more people. We need more people, because people were making a lot of money. The animators were making a ton of money, even without overtime. But they had to crank out that stuff. So someone who had got out of school in 95, by the time 2000 showed up, that career was gone, because they decided they were going into the producers were going into with Toy Story and such. Now they said, okay, we just have to we're doing computer stuff.
Right.
So anybody who had the experience, we're talking about 2000. That's 20 years ago. So if you graduated in school and said when you're 22 in 1970 and 1995, you're 27 in 2000, you're 47, you're getting closer to now, and you haven't done that work in about 20 years.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's why I say today you can't really just bring people together unless they really have continued to make their own films and whatnot. And most people are not doing that. They have some other they're trying to figure out other ways of making their livelihood.
All right. Well, that's a good jumping off point. So let's move on to your new livelihood.
Yeah.
Right. So you're on Kickstarter. You're on Indiegogo.
Yeah.
Right. You got Mega Moose and you have Snuffy and Zoe.
Yeah.
And those are fantastic looking, comic books. I mean,
Thanks.
So what got you going from animation into comics? I know it's not that big of a step, but
right.
So you go ahead.
Okay. Well. This is what I did was I've always been drawing these characters because it's a very animatable design. Those are my the way I draw. That's my personal style of drawing. Over the years, I mean, starting in 1990, I started learning how to write. So, I didn't want to just be an artist, and also being a comic book artist, a comic book writer. I wanted to create my own comic strips. So you had to create your own, material, whether it be jokes or what have you. I started doing stuff. Mega Moose is from 1988. I did a satirical series for a magazine called Comic Relief.
Okay.
Comic Relief, and it was 1980. It was very satirical in terms of, and it did a whole bunch of things. It always had Bloom County, and it always had Doonesbury. And it was a once a month magazine. It was a monthly magazine, and I did the equivalent of 4 Sunday pages, and I did the adventures of Mega Moose, but it was more of a Rocky and Bullwinkle thing,
right?
But I was still writing stories and whatnot. And then over the I stopped doing that. Because I got picked up and was working full time, for an animation studio. So I just didn't want to do that, but I still wound up learning to write novels with my wife, Kathy. So writing has always been part of what I developed. And so now I was doing a short for myself with Snuffy and Zoe, which is on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. It took me 2 years to do the whole thing myself. With music and with sound effects and coloring and doing everything. So 2.5 minutes. And so I said, okay, well, I was showing this off, on the screen and what have you, and someone said, okay, well, how about if you do, do a comic book version of it? Be interested in that. I also at the same time was writing, the Bloodwing, which is we'll talk about later on, but a novella. I wrote a novella and published that in 2013. So I did that. So anyway, so doing Snuffy and Zoe, I enjoyed doing that because it's cartoon. It's old-fashioned cartoon more. I mean, it's something that you could see in the 1930s and 40s because there's innocence and whimsy in it. So that's where I go. And there's minimal dialogue because you don't need a lot of dialogue for this kind of work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then I did. Then so after doing 2 of those books, I decided, okay, I want to, put them out, but I need more than just the Snuffy and Zoe because I was seeing how Kickstarters were, it's not an easy place. Or when I say Kickstarter, I mean crowdfunding is not a place yet for family stuff for the most part. So I said, okay, let me do something that might be for everybody, So I did I pulled out Mega Moose from 30 years ago, and I updated him and making him a nerd, making the character, adding the element of a nerd as the major character, and gets a feather, magic feather, and he from a wizard. He tickles his nose, he sneezes, and he turns into Mega Moose with all the powers of the animal kingdom. So I have this range for families from 4 to 7, and then from 8 to 12-year-olds, and there's not much comic book material for that age group. So that's why I've done those 2 series.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, that is one of the things, is because I think one of the issues with Kickstarter and Indiegogo is that most of the people who buy there, they buy for themselves, and they're going to be adults. So they're not looking, you know what I mean? They're not there to buy for kids. So that's why I think it's a little rougher. It's a little bit harder. But I think what's funny is I think as the community ages up and they start having children, those opportunities are going to open up. I think especially in the future.
Well, I introduced myself last year with my rough sketch. Crowdfunding, and on both platforms, which did a whole range of as a portfolio of all the work I did from the age of 6, because my mom saved some of my drawings. So from that to what I'm doing presently. So you see a lot of stuff from Dragon's Lair, Space Ace, Rock and Rule. You see stuff from the Star Wars Holiday Special, where I animated Boba Fett. So there's a lot of material there, and plus Batman commercials, things of that sort. So you can see what kind of work goes into each drawing. They're not finished pieces in that, they look like, they're colored and printed. They're all original pencil sketches from that time.
So now let me ask you a question about Indiegogo and Kickstarter. So you've done both platforms. Yes. Right. Now, which one do you find has been more beneficial for you?
They both have been, for adult, okay. The Kickstarter last year, I did quite well. I doubled, my original, trial. I doubled 2.5 times that, and then Indiegogo. Actually, with the Indiegogo, with Indemand, for that Kickstarter for the rough sketch, that went on for quite a while, and again, quadrupled, what I was looking for. In fact, even more, because I only wanted to do $500 for the Indiegogo campaign, because I just wanted to be in demand. So between the 2, I raised a lot of good money. Paid for my computer. It paid for things. And so that's great, but it is for adults.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is aimed at adults. And as I said, it's frustrating right now to see that people are reluctant to give it a shot. They think it's childish.
Mm-hmm.
The writing is what you would read in basically a golden age and a silver age style book.
Right.
And that's what entry level would be for young readers. But if, as we say, the readership that the supporters that go into crowdfunding are looking for adult material that they relate to in the present period of time, it's not for them. However, if they had an inner child, I mean, there are some, that say, okay, let me just have a fun read.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go back to what it was like when I was 10 years old.
Right.
Or 9 years old and read that kind of stuff. But it's not what you saw. Again, I don't, talk down to anybody. I'm not doing old-fashioned stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about just, non-sexual, explicit, hyper-violent material.
Right.
And if there is no market for that, then we're in a sad state as an industry, because is that all that can sell?
Right. Yeah. That's.
I'm not being attacked. I'm just saying, if dollars talk. You look at what is the most popular stuff, and you go, okay, is that it? But then again, you can't expand beyond a certain base.
Yeah. No, it's very true, because even with my work, the Oswald Chronicles, I show people this.
Yeah.
Right, and they say, "Oh, look, it's a really cute mouse. It must be for kids." Right.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is, what they don't know is that it goes well beyond that. It's just like, I tell everybody it's really for people who are 12 and up.
Right.
Is if they've seen Lord of the Rings, like if they can watch Lord of the Rings on their own, then you're good. That's fine. But you unfortunately, I think those of us who are trying to do things a little differently, who don't necessarily want to do that adult material, or want to do a superhero character, or want to do some chick with large breasts, right? If we're not looking to do that type of work, we sometimes get shunted to the side, and we're just like, okay, well, you're marginalized in this area, and it's going to take all of us a while to break out of that. But I think there's room to grow. And I think that market is definitely growing for all of us. I mean, have you seen it? Have you seen through your experience, like, that things are getting better for you?
No, this one here, let's quite honestly, the Kickstarter, the Indiegogo campaign, I just barely squeaked by in time.
Mm-hmm. Right. And
it was only because one person, an angel, rather, how would I call it? A sort of a good Samaritan, wanted to have comics to give to a local boys club of kids between the ages of 7 and 10. And that's why he helped me. He said, okay, I will get you over so that we can at least do that. Nice. But once again, it's kind of like, okay, so Indiegogo is nowhere near what I kind of thought, even though as the top tier, I've got original Boba Fett drawings,
right,
pencil sketch. So there is definitely a correlation between not wanting that type of comic book, and what the readership. Now, the COVID has probably have a tremendous amount to do with all this. Yeah. People don't have the money to do that. It is kind of like, okay, I don't know. Even if you gave it, even if there were like, it was only a $10 thing or a $5 thing, would they be able to, even afford that? Because once again, you don't know what everybody's personal experiences are like, and I can't make a judgment on that alone. But there seems to be a tremendous amount of money still for the adult material.
Right. But also, it's a problem of a signal to noise.
What?
Signal to noise.
Oh yeah.
We, just getting the noise, just getting our message out.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's very difficult for us. The small indie guys, it's just harder for us to get it out there.
Right.
I mean, because Keanu Reeves raised $1.4 million.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that, but let's put it this way. I mean, the artwork and the concept is not much different than 25 other concept. I mean, to be frank, you have to say it's not a huge difference. It's because he did it.
Yeah, that's
all it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's all. I mean, in terms of his piece of work, I don't know what the artwork. I mean, you see the samples of the artwork, but you don't know what the story is going to be. But if it's going to be something that will be turned into a movie, then it's not comic book work. It is a storyboard, presentation for a series, a live action series.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure after he's done with John Wick, this will be the next thing.
Yeah.
The only thing I give him credit for is that he does have a writer named Matt Kint that he's hooked up with, who's an excellent writer. That guy, he's written comic books for years. That guy's he's somebody I look up to, and there's not many of those. And I mean, the guy can write. That guy's really, really good.
Right.
The artist, I think they got Ron Garney, who's an older Marvel artist. The guy's incredible. So so he has really good people on the project.
Oh, there's no sense, there's no denying the professionalism of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that has a lot going for it in comparison to many crowdfunding, job things that projects that are about, there is a certain level of experience, and then there is some that are just barely squeking through.
They're still learning.
Yeah.
That's how I like to put it. Not ready for prime time. They're still learning. We'll get it to that point. But they'll make it.
Yeah.
Give them time. But I mean, but it's signal to noise. Keanu Reeves. His signal is way out there.
Mm-hmm.
So but that's our job. We'd have to just keep pushing at it.
Yeah. I think you have to be able to say, okay, I have something that you don't know. You still don't know you need.
Mm-hmm.
Or
exactly.
or will want, because you have to give them that they have to understand. It's not like acquired taste. What happens is that as you get older, you go through stages.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and once again, as I said, 4 to 7 year olds are one thing, 8 to 12-year-olds are something else, and then about 13 to 15 to about 42. Okay, and then it starts changing.
Right.
After the age, in your mid 40s, you start looking for a little more than that.
No, I know. I'm there already.
And I mean, I'm not trying to be facetious about it. I'm just saying this is what sells. That's why the market is 18 to 49-year-olds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For TV or for whatever, you're going at a particular range.
Yeah. Because it gets to a point where I'm sitting down, I'm watching something, and I watch for 15 minutes. All right, well, I already know what's gonna happen. Click. It's like it does. It's just like I know what's gonna happen. Click.
Yeah.
It's very rare you can find something that it's gonna be like that's gonna surprise you.
Mm-hmm.
Although fortunately, I watch a show. I don't know if you heard The Boys.
Yeah.
On Amazon Prime, and I read the comic. The comic was good, but the TV show is just a lot better than the comic, and that's saying a lot because the comic was excellent. So but once in a while you get happily surprised. All right, so let's move on from that.
Okay.
So John, you were talking before the show, and you had said that you had another project coming up, right? Which sounded really interesting to me. Was Bloodwing Angel, or Bloodwing Angel Chronicles.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that. What's that about?
Well, I was going through some hard times, in the around 2010 to about 2013. And it got to the point where I said, I gotta, it was my frustration cry. And I decided to do, having grown up Catholic, and but I also knew about the Book of Job and the Old Testament and New Testament and whatnot. I said, well, this really sounds like Job, because I'm getting beat on. And I've tried I've lived my life the best way I know how, and I'm just getting so beat up here, with stuff that I can't control. I don't know why, and so on. Anyway, so I decided I was going to do, and I had a whole bunch of books on angels and things like that from previous times, because sometimes you gather books as for reference and whatnot. So there's a book, and you go, okay, there's a lot of in Catholicism and Judaism and Islam, they all use angels as messengers. There's a tradition of angels. So I just looked through everything and whatnot, and I said, okay, well, there is one thing that is a basic message, is about innocence lost. And I thought, okay, not that I'm innocent, but that, I didn't do anything wrong. I followed the rules. I did what was supposed to do. And yet I felt I was being beaten on. So I took an angel, the smallest little, most innocent, the last innocent angel, the youngest minted angel, and I said, okay, what would be the worst thing? What could you do? Well, that's a thing where you take him and you just throw him out and you say, okay, kid, it's the thing about Job, the Book of Job, is you've got God and Satan sort of having a competition and say, hey, listen, you could beat on this character and he will never, go against me and whatnot. Well, I didn't want to be literal like that. I just I took that as just a metaphor, took it and said, okay, what literally happens when you don't tell an angel, that little angel, why you're being thrown out? You've just been thrown out, and suddenly, said, forget it, So I didn't go Judeo-Christian. I just said two competing deities, and they're using that as a pawn. And so this character is a pawn now, and he'd be thrown into a physical world. Well, that changes, that rips through the fabric of the universe, because once the deity has gone against his own truth, which is, I will never, if you obey me, I will not abandon you. It goes ripped through. Well, suddenly you change it. The whole fabric of society, everything is ripped. So that's what happens. He's thrown out through faster than the speed of light, rips through the universe, and then it shifts back, snaps back, but in a different reality. And suddenly the angel is landing in this world where reality has changed, and it is now the angel is now in physical form, as semi-mortal, supernatural being. With angels are both male and female,
right?
So therefore, as a physical manifestation, it has both male and female aspects to it all the way through. It thinks, feels, looks, acts, both male and female. So that's where the character has to make sense of this world that is there, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on with it. So that is the premise of this, and that's Bloodwing Angel. And the reason I call it Bloodwing is because it's the red tips of his wings as his blood ring, and that's a Bloodwing.
Gotcha. Now, is this? Well, you said it was a short story, right? A novella.
It was a novella that I did, but I created a whole environment so that it's ongoing.
Right.
It's not just, beginning, middle, and end, because reality is not beginning, middle, and end. It's beginning, and we are living a middle. But you can have stories that their phases and development as you go from one thing to another, but you can still have story arcs.
Yes.
So, that's okay. But I don't do it in the realistic format. I use it in my caricatured animated thing, and it's a step above. It is basically I give my humor. I'm thinking that once a Kickstarter my Kickstarter campaign comes to an end, I will start uploading a page or two every couple of days on my blog to start whetting the appetite for people to see what else there is.
Right.
Now,
are you looking to release this, let's say, as individual comics or as one graphic novel?
No, it's too big. What I want to do is the first one will be about. I did the web comic. I turned it into a web comic back in 2013, 14. Okay, gotcha. I did do it. I got about 58 pages of artwork up, on the website, but I took it down because people didn't, react to it. It's hard to get people to react to a web comic, so I just took it down. But what I will do is I want to get it to a certain point where certain threads of the story, because it's not just about one character. There are families that have to come into humans and come into the part with the neighborhoods and things where the angel has to be connected to. So I need about another 10 pages or so. So it'll be, the first one will be about 72 pages long. Okay. So there is a substantial read to tie in together and say, okay, we're here. What's going to happen next?
Gotcha. So you completed the story, minus those 10 pages on as the webcomic.
Well, that story is not complete. That section of it, the novella. I'm working from the novella. Hello, you froze for just a moment.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah. No, the novella was done and completed. What I did, I added elements. I tried to develop it as a TV show, and so I did a script. And so basically, I started pulling those elements together, writing it as a TV script and whatnot. But that's only one little section of the whole concept that goes on. So, I would think that to do it properly, I would have to do about 30 to 32 pages per issue, and sending it out once every 6 months as a new issue. That would reach a certain segment of that, so that we could do that. No, otherwise there's too much. There's too long a lag.
Right.
And it's too big a story, but at the same time, there's too much fun not to do it. So.
No, I got you. Yeah, I'm constantly struggling with that with Oswald.
Yeah. Well, and you've been doing it for how many years now? Longer than you want to admit.
Well, I started in 91, 92.
Yeah.
Self-publishing. I've been doing Oswald probably since 96, 97, but the comic started probably about 12 years ago.
Okay.
Because I started in prose, and that was in 96, 97.
Okay.
But then, comics probably about 12 years ago. So yeah, I'm about 1,000 pages in.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, I haven't written that far. I've just written the worlds,
Gotcha. No, it's like I was talking to someone last night. I'm 1,000 pages in, and about another 1,500 pages to go.
Well, at least you have a life's work to play with. You
Okay.
know, I mean, many people. It's interesting. Do you have any particular themes that you seem to permeate throughout your work?
Well, this particular one,
Mhm.
I think what's funny is no one's ever asked me that question about it. Like, what is the purpose of it? Because Oswald's a mouse,
Right.
and the story is supposed to be about you being alone and being the smallest thing, but being able to achieve greater than what you are and what you're expected of you. You understand it? So it's like, even though no one expects anything of you, you understand you can still achieve great things.
Mhm.
And that's for me has always been kind of like a through line for the story.
Okay.
But there's like tons of other things
Yeah.
going on. Like this, it gets insane after a while.
Well, I know. But I'm just saying is that most authors have something that keeps cropping up, themes that crop up in their work. That's what I mean. For example, with Snuffy and Zoe and Megamoose, and now with Bloodwing Angel, it's about innocence.
Right.
How does it manifest itself? What they have to deal with in this world, and how do you maintain your innocence?
Right. Right.
And that's the kind of thing. So yeah, but everybody's got something. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like I said, for Oswald, that's primarily what it is. Since he's a mouse, no one expects anything of him. You understand? You are basically the lowest thing in the food chain, right? So it's like, when he does what he does, because he becomes a great sorcerer, right? And that was his destiny, and to achieve certain things, everyone's like, you're just a damn mouse, and he's just like, not really, it's just, because he grows beyond that, at one point, and it's just like, and if you see it from the very beginning, he is just like a little kid, and and I kind of bring him up through, and people, when they initially see him, they're like, oh, okay, this is a cute little mouse story. And then when I show some of the later stories, and I was like, why is he fighting like Cthulhu or something, and it goes beyond. And like I said, it just gets insane. So it's just, it's one of those things where it's just like, I put him in Dream, and I do all this insane stuff, and it's just like, I was like, look, I wanted to have fun with it, and that's what I'm doing. So, yeah. So
well, yeah. I was going to say, it's kind of different. The whole thing about, whoa, it's a mouse and you can't do anything with it, but or it's cute and what have you. There are different attitudes. Just because something is realistic or is drawn as a cartoon doesn't mean there isn't any heft to it.
Right.
That's a thing that seems to only be in existence here in North America, between Canada and the U.S., or even in England. But in terms of like, a cartoon could have an enormous, it could be much more effective with the caricature than it is, with it trying to be live action,
right.
Or illustrative.
Right. Exactly. I'm like, look, my artist, Jade Gonzalez, she's fantastic. But I mean, if I could have worked with Arthur Adams, who wouldn't? I don't know if you know Arthur, but the guy's work is incredible. But I mean, I'm very happy where I'm at. So that's, I think, one of the things people see it, they say, oh, it's so nice and cute. And I'm like, okay, then they read it and they're like, oh, this is a little different. They're like,
well, there's an what is it? Cast the Castle, Red Wall. I mean, Red Wall. I mean,
yeah.
Come on, and that is that. If we're gonna get, I think there's a limited, what's the word? Sense of the comic book industry. The public, they're only going to get what they want. Okay,
right.
If you do not have people come and get attracted to the comic book industry that have different tastes, then you will only be making hot dogs.
Right.
And that's it.
Yep.
Now there's only so much you could do with a hot dog. You have to have something else. Now, there's nothing wrong with with a really good hot dog, because a terrible hot dog is just, I spit it out, you know.
Right.
So there's all that thing, and so you could dress it up in many ways, but a hot dog is still a hot dog. Mm-hmm. So the thing is that if the world is, if the industry is to, or the as a group, this thing is going to survive and expand in any way, shape, or form, then you have to bring new people in with different tastes, because otherwise the present day, the people who are here, the audience that's here, eventually will die, and then who's replacing them? Nobody.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the thing. I've been an indie guy almost, I wouldn't say from the beginning, because I was really young when I started. Mm-hmm. But from the moment that I saw indie comics and I knew they existed, I was in. Mm-hmm. You know, my first indie comic was Jack Kirby's Captain Victory.
Oh, okay.
PC Comics. Yeah. And that's the first indie comic I ever saw. And I saw it in this store called Super Snipe. God, must have been 79, 80.
Oh, well, I have a copy of Super Snipe.
No, there was a, yeah, there was a, no, go ahead.
This is a comic book, the kid who had the world's biggest collection of comics. Mm-hmm. Now, yeah. Is that the same character you're talking about?
No, that was the comic book store. That's the name.
Oh, mine was a comic book character.
Right. Yeah. No, I know of the character, but the store was called Super Snipe.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was like one of the earliest comic shops that I think was around, and I mean, you know, it was just fantastic, you know, run into that. But ever since after that, I was always into indie comics, and the thing I liked about indie comics is they were different. They were different from Marvel and DC. There was just something different about them. So that's why I gravitated always towards them, you know. So yeah, that's that. So John, Let's all right. We've been at this for a little while, so we're close to wrapping up, but we're not done there. We're not done just yet. I got a few more questions for you.
Oh, okay,
right?
Go ahead.
So, but before we do that, though, I got two things to ask you. One, is there anything you wanted to discuss, or was there a question maybe I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about?
I will say that in in terms of Bloodwing, I think. If anybody's curious, I will, as I said, I will be putting up, material, on my website, my blog, so that I could do that. But it's more in terms of sometimes I would say definitely this is a not safe for work book. Right. Okay. Is and even though it will be, say, oh, this looks like an animation thing, it must be, there's a Disney-esque. No, it's kind of like a Fritz the Cat in many ways.
Right.
So there are those elements in there, because I do not mince a lot of. I mean, I try to write this correctly, but religion in this world is anything from crosses. In the Catholic crosses to sacrificial daggers. It doesn't matter. This is a world where religion, anything goes. So we're talking about stuff that is not safe for work. And also, the imagery is try to be as clean as possible. But within the story, I don't try to say, oh, I have to have a fig leaf, decorating this area because it might offend somebody. No, it's what it is.
Right. Nice. No, that's good. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So other than that, I'm good.
Okay,
so,
cool.
What's your questions?
All right. No, well, there's one more question. There's one more thing. Let everybody know where they can find you and your work.
Okay. Right now, I'm on Kickstarter, and it's just John the Animator Comics. That's the Kickstarter. I'm like $218 short of funding a $500 goal. I mean, that's all it is. So there is that, and I've got like about 17 or 18 days left to go on that.
You'll make it.
I've got the Indiegogo campaign is on Indemand, but right now I'd rather if you're going to support me, help me get the Kickstarter done, and that's fine. But you can then, but in terms of following me, I'm on mostly on Facebook and as John Celestri, and on Twitter as John Celestri at Celestri John, and then you can get anything you want to find out more about me. I'm on YouTube as John Celestri, and that's basically it.
All right, cool. Now, now these questions are usually geared towards like independent artists and creators and stuff. So I have to like kind of switch them around for you because you have a lot more depth than some of the other individuals. So I got to change this question around for you. So, now if you had your druthers about you, right, and you were able to animate, like they called you up and they said, John, we want to give you an opportunity to animate something, right? Mm-hmm. What would you want to animate if they called you up today and they was like, John, just pick something, pick a property, or even what would you want to animate?
I would like to. What I would like to do is go back and gather up Brad Bird and Jerry Reese, and it will go back and try and get actually the Spirit feature.
Nice. Wow.
That was because I was geared for that. I was going to be on that if they ever had the money. This is like 1983, which is before. This is right at the time of going to Bluth's.
Mm-hmm. Wow, and that's Will Eisner's The Spirit.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay. They had gotten the rights, the options to do that.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So yeah, that's what I would do.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I would do it. I would do it in the same because at the same time, a few years later, I did a bunch of Batman commercials. So I know how to do that kind of animation style for that kind of film.
Nice. Wow. That would have been really awesome.
Yeah.
They just never got the financing for it, I would imagine. So.
Well, at that time, they didn't. Nobody thought animation made any money.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the person they were producing they were trying to get it was the producer who worked with Lucas to do Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back, and he couldn't get the money for it.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. So times change.
Yeah. This is true. This just goes to show you. I mean, Guillermo del Toro couldn't get The Mountains of Madness done with Brad Pitt, not Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, and the guy from Alien, not Alien, Aliens, famous director. He did he did Avatar.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I've seen your moment.
Yeah, same thing. But even with them on board, he couldn't get that movie made. You got Tom Cruise.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but the thing is that the bean counters are bean counters. I mean, and so much of it is like, I don't know. I mean, that's what Hollywood is.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even bean counting. It's just kind of like, what side of the bed did they get off of, and who were they in with?
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
All right, so now I'm gonna ask you this other weird question I have. So if you got the golden ticket to go up to any of these companies, Marvel or DC comic book companies, right? And they said, John, pick a book, any character, and it doesn't just have to be Marvel or DC. It could be any of these other companies. What would be the comic book you would want to write and illustrate?
Captain Marvel, the original Captain Marvel adventures, not as Shazam, but as the original, as Captain Marvel.
Right.
That's what I would do. Captain Marvel adventures.
Cool. Nice. No, that's really cool. All right. So now I got some comparatives that I like to do. All right. So I throw everybody in this. As I like to say, I'll softball you, and then we'll work into the more crazy ones. Captain America or Batman?
Captain America.
Okay. Godzilla or Gamera?
Godzilla.
Okay. Um, hmm. Kirk or Picard?
Kirk.
Okay. Some of these will come with why.
I'm sorry?
Some
Okay.
of these will come with why.
Okay.
Like I'll ask you why
Yeah,
you
okay.
chose it. Some of them will come with that. Stan Lee or Jack Kirby?
Jack Kirby.
Now that one I'll ask you why.
Because Jack could tell a story. Jack Kirby was doing all this work with Captain America while when Stan Lee was still going for coffee.
This is true. This is very true. You know, it's funny. Like I have, I just finished reading, I guess, a biography of Jack Kirby, an illustrated biography by I think it's Tom Scioli. It recently just came out. And after reading that, I was just like, wow, because it really shows you how he was screwed over so many times, and it's just like, and Stan Lee, nice guy, he did his thing, but it really puts you in a way of feeling differently about him, or at least it did for me. It's just like, oh, Stan presented himself one way but acted another.
He did not create Captain America.
No, he didn't.
He did not. He didn't. He basically he was the nephew of Martin Goodman, who was the publisher, and he basically Jack is 50% of the generation of all the stuff that you got, and then the other half is basically Simon and Schuster with Superman. If you don't have those two elements, those two entities,
right?
What have you got? And then with Kirby, it has to be Joe Simon. It's Joe Simon and Jack Kirby because it's Joe Simon who created Captain America. Jack Kirby helped give him form.
Right.
They were doing all that stuff, and they were anyway. Yeah, and then Simon and Schuster. Without them, nobody's doing anything.
Yeah. No. I mean, yeah, I find this stuff fascinating. Like, because I've read some of the stuff as a kid, and most of the stuff I really read is guys from the 80s. Right. I read a lot of that stuff, and then a lot of interviews with those guys, and so on and so forth. John Byrne, George Perez, guys like that. But then going even further back, when you start reading about Jack Kirby and the older guys, you're like, ooh, this was a totally different game. But yeah, I mean, I just find this stuff really interesting. All right, so let's continue.
Okay.
Will Eisner or Alex Toth?
Will Eisner.
Okay. Fair enough. I mean, you already said the spirits. It was kind of unfair.
Well, no, and I'll tell you why. With Eisner, his everything had a feeling of grit to it. Alex Toth is very Hanna-Barbera, very clean,
right?
And that's the difference for me.
Gotcha. Robin Hood or Zorro?
All right. If it's Guy Williams as Zorro, playing Zorro, or Errol Flynn as Robin Hood, then it's Robin Hood.
Yeah, I have to agree. Yeah.
I'm giving you the question. I'm giving you my answer and the reasons why.
No, I get it, because that's my favorite version of Robin Hood.
Yeah.
Errol Flynn. Wow. It takes me back. I was like, oof. All right, we've done a few of these, so we're gonna do a couple more, and then we'll wrap up. But here's one for you: Asimov or Heinlein?
I guess Asimov.
Okay. Fair enough. All right, we'll wrap it up with this: Bernie Wrightson or Barry Windsor Smith?
Bernie Wrightson or who?
Barry Windsor Smith.
Bernie Wrightson. And there's an element in there because I know some of the people who he worked with. He worked in the animation industry.
Right.
You know, so yeah, there you go.
Okay. Fair enough. So John, we made it to the end. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. So please, one more time, let everybody know where they can find you and your work.
You can find me on Kickstarter with John the Animator Comics. So just help me get through the to the finish line for that. You could get me on at this point on my YouTube channel, John Celestri, and or John the Animator Guy also. The Twitter is John Celestri at Celestri John, and Facebook is John Celestri. And on Google, just type in my name, John Celestri, and you'll see a whole bunch of stuff, that you can Google out.
All right. So there you go, folks. Thank you so much for being here. Like, subscribe, and especially go check out his Kickstarter. It's worth having. If you have kids, nephews, nieces, these are books for them. These are the books. These are the types of books you want them to have in their lives. All right. So thank you so much for joining us. I'll talk to you all soon. Have a great day.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, John.